Hey guys, welcome to the video, Salt here. Today I'll be going over the primary weapon, the Tenet Flux Rifle. But before we start, let's go over our commenter board. The first commenter of the last video was Chaotic Autism, and the top commenter of the last video was Nomad VO. Then we have our recent channel supporters here of Whoop-De-Wham, Nice Bear, and Colonel 06. Thank you so much for your support. Unique and interesting things about the Tenet Flux Rifle is that it's a lich style weapon, so you'll be able to pick a progenitor element that comes innately on the weapon. The other thing with the Tenet Flux Rifle is that it's considered a beam weapon, even though it's not technically a beam weapon. And that's because the regular Flux Rifle is a beam weapon. And so it's still able to use all those beam mods. Now, most of these beam mods you're not going to use. Sinister Reach is not useful on the Tenet version. Combustion Beam is pretty mid on the Tenet version. You're not really going to use this in a min-maxed build. However, there is a augment for the Flux Rifle that works on the Tenet version as well, called Flux Overdrive. Let's go over this a little bit here. So this says status chance fluctuates between 150% and 250% over 5 seconds while the beam is fired. And again, that also works for the Tenet version's bullets, I should say, sorry. Now that 150% you're going to get all the time, that is additive status chance, and the additional 100% that happens over 5 seconds while you're shooting is actually multiplicative status chance. So this could be a very good mod on certain builds. I have two builds to show you here today. One won't use this, one will use it. Now I have two builds to showcase here today. I have a crit focused build and I have a status focused build, and the status focused build is going to utilize that augment for the Flux Rifle. Now, when I was doing the kill testing between the crit and the status build, the crit build was beating out the status build by a bit. Not a huge amount, but it was still noticeably beating the status build. And so I think the crit build is going to be your best option. I'm still going to showcase the status build though, because it wasn't too far off. It was only about 50 to 100 kills off in all of its runs under the crit build. So I'm still going to show the status build because that augment is really cool. It's just that it couldn't beat the crit build in any of its runs there. So let's go over the crit build first. Now the progenitor you're going to be using for the crit build is a toxic progenitor. And that's because if you are going in without an external source to make viral, then you're going to be putting viral on the weapon itself. So you'd be using this toxin. It's going to mix with the cold mod you put at the end here, and that's going to make viral. Now, if you do have an external way to produce viral, then instead you use corrosive. And again, you still have a toxic progenitor. Instead of primed cryo rounds, you put an electric mod here, and now you have corrosive. And that's why you go with a toxic progenitor for this crit setup. Let's go over the mods now. We have Galvanized Chamber for multi-shot, Galvanized Scope for critical chance, Prime Shred for fire rate and punch through, Bladed Rounds for critical damage, Critical Delay for critical chance, Vital Sense for critical damage, Hunter Munitions for a 30% chance to apply a slash proc on a critical. This is your weakest mod slot just because the Tenet Flux Rifle has really bad alpha damage. Like it doesn't do a lot of damage per bullet, and so your slash procs are pretty pitiful. Granted, it shoots very fast, so you get a lot of slash procs, but you're gonna need like, 100 of the Tenet Flux Rifle slash procs to equal like one Dread Incarnate slash proc. So because of that, Hunter Munitions is definitely your Riven slot. If you have a Riven, go ahead and plop it right over Hunter Munitions. In the last slot here, we have Primed Cryo Rounds. This is again gonna mix with our Toxic Progenitor to make viral. And if you had an external way to make viral already, then instead use the electric mod here, and that'll mix with the toxin and make corrosive. In the Exile slot, we use Vigilante Supplies for a 5% chance to enhance critical hits from primary weapons. And in the Arcane slot, we're going to be using Primary Deadhead for 360% flat damage, 30% headshot multiplier, and minus 50% weapon recoil. Now let's go over the status build. And as far as the progenitor goes, this is really going to be up to you depending on what damaging status you choose to go with. And it does need to be a damaging status because we're going to be using a mod called Rifle Elementalist, which gives us plus 90% status damage. So that would be things like electric, toxic, blast, gas, things like that. I myself have chosen to go with a full electric build. This is also what I did my testing on today versus the crit build. So I have electric in my progenitor slot here. I also have an electric mod. That way I get even more electric weighting for more electric procs. I think blast could also be quite competitive versus electric, and blast is a combined element. So you would use a cold mod and then the heat progenitor to make blast. And I also think gas could be competitive versus those other two. And you would use the toxic mod and a heat progenitor to make gas in that case. So you can decide on any of those three to use there. So let's go over the mods now. We have Galvanized Chamber for multi-shot, Galvanized Scope for crit chance. I see an overwhelming amount of people on Overframe using Galvanized Aptitude in this slot instead of Scope. And I really don't understand why. I mean, it's Overframe, I guess, and you can't really explain these things. But Galvanized Aptitude is only additive on this weapon instead of multiplicative. We already have a lot of flat damage with Primary Deadhead with 360 flat damage there. So we don't really need any of the flat damage from Aptitude. So this is effectively just 80% status chance on a weapon we're going to get way more status chance on anyway with like Flux Overdrive. So I feel like you get way more value out of higher crit tiers with Galvanized Scope rather than Aptitude, but I just kind of wanted to say that because there is a ridiculous amount of people on Overframe using Aptitude for some ungodly reason. Prime Shred for fire rate and punch through. Rifle Elementalist we already went over. Critical Delay for crit chance. Vital Sense for crit damage. Flux Overdrive we already went over initially. High Voltage for my 60/60 electric. Again, depending on if you wanted to go with gas or blast, this might be different. In the Exilus slot, we're going to be going for Vigilante Supplies, just like the crit build. And in the Arcane slot, we're still going to be going for Primary Deadhead, just like in the crit build. This is how you build out the primary weapon, the Tenet Flux Rifle. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future content. So now we'll have a 5-minute gameplay portion showcasing the weapon, and when that's done, we'll come back to the Orbiter and we'll give it its final score and ranking. So I'll see you guys again after the gameplay. Alrighty, we're about to start this gameplay portion up here. Let's go ahead and hack the terminal and get into the Tenet Flux Rifle. Now, I don't have any externals on, just like I normally don't. That way we're just showcasing the weapon itself. I'm using that first crit build, which I believe is the better build, which is a bit unfortunate because it does have that augment, which is really cool. I think depending on the Warframe you have, though, like some Warframes might have buffs that make that status build better. I think there maybe are some niche cases where that status build could be better. So that's why I wanted to showcase it, is that it's not too far off from the crit build. When I was doing the kill testing, it was like, why are you stealing my weapon? Give me this thing back. It wasn't too far off. It was always losing to the crit build, but it was only losing by like 50 to 100 kills in 10 minutes, which isn't too bad. And like I said, I think there might be some externals, like with maybe Warframes or something, where the status build may selectively beat out the crit build. Selectively, is that the right word? You know what I mean. You know what I mean. And then also, I guess to play devil's advocate with Aptitude versus Scope, we have enough flat damage on the build already, but flat damage does technically increase the damage of dots. You know, flat damage and elemental damage does. So, I mean, maybe that's why people are using it. I still believe you're going to get a lot more value out of Scope. But then you also have the thing where a lot of people just don't like using Scope because maybe they're on console, maybe they're on mobile, and like getting headshots is a big pain in the butt. And in that case, yeah, absolutely go Aptitude. Because you really only get value out of Scope if you can maintain like, I don't know, like 3 or more stacks probably. If you can't do that, then you're better off just going Aptitude and banking on a little bit more dot damage and a little bit of status chance, you know. So it's not too bad. I guess to play devil's advocate, Aptitude's not too bad. I still think Scope you get more value out of. If you're able to actually extract that value. Oh no, New Loka is attacking us. You're right, she's only going to increase our kill count. Bring us more mobs. Bring us more mobs. I hate you, Drakmaster. Always steal my weapon. I see you in there. Now without scope, I'm trying to remember the base crit chance. I think it's 20%. So without scope, that means with critical delay, you're at 60, which is not great because I mean like 40% of your shots then are white non-crits, which don't take crit damage at all into account. This weapon does have below average crit damage though, but it's still good to have a bit. As long as it's not completely horrible, right? Like it's 1.8. I know the base is 1.8, which is below average, but it's not like way below average. So without scope, you're, I think at 60. Again, forgive me if I'm wrong there. I'm trying to pull these numbers out of my head here. I think it's 60 without scope and just critical delay. Scope puts you into full yellows and even a little bit of oranges, where Vigilante supplies, you know, if it works on an orange, you'll see a red once in a while, which is not, it's not often, but you get a little bit extra damage sometimes with that. Yeah, here, dog. Now, versus the Acolyte, this is going to feel pretty basic. It's going to be your basic assault rifle, which is going to be pretty mid versus the Acolyte. It's not going to feel great. It's not going to feel horrible, but it's probably going to feel like mid to bad. I'm just going to top off on all these life sports just so when the Thraxes and Acolyte come, we can focus on them. All right, there we go. And let's get some stacks back up for scope and deadhead. Maybe the Acolyte will just be really late and we won't get an Acolyte. I guess we'll see. I think they can technically spawn all the way out to like 8 minutes. So let's get these Thraxes down. Punchy munitions does okay work on them. Pretty decent for single target. Well, there you go. Okay, there we go. And we got Misery. Let's kill Misery just to show. Let's look at our kill count is first. 300. Okay. It's actually one of the worst runs that I got for the 5-minute counts. A lot of my let me look over here. Yeah, a lot of my 5-minute counts were. Well, I don't want to spoil the thrilling conclusion, but a lot of my 5-minute counts were in the high 300s. So okay, here's Misery here. You can see he is taking mid levels of damage. Very mid levels of damage here. Just remember though, Acolytes, they can't stack statuses past 4, so it's, you know, it's not like Thraxes where Hunter munitions you can get like 100 slash procs on them. These guys get 4 slash procs, and because it's a Tenet Flux Rifle that has little tiny pitiful slash procs, they don't really do much, to be honest. So you're just really getting your raw damage on them. There we go, he's down. Okay, yeah, so we said at 5 minutes we were at like, we killed a little bit more, but that was with the Acolyte there. At 5 minutes we were like just a little bit over 300, which is one of our lower 5-minute runs, so. Okay, let's go back to the Orbiter. Welcome back to the Orbiter, guys. So let's go over how the Tenet Flux Rifle did in its 3 10-minute runs on Steel Path Lewis Circulus. It got 670, 721, and 699 kills. And if we average those 3 numbers, that's going to be 696, putting it in the B tier for kill per minute potential. And I think B tier is absolutely fair for this weapon. You know, 696 is actually pretty close to that A tier. However, when I was doing the gameplay portion of this video, where I only do the 5-minute runs, I actually had to do a few takes of it because I messed up on some of the things I was saying. I was stuttering and weird stuff like that. But all of those 5-minute runs that I was doing for this video, I was scoring in the low 300s. So the 10-minute runs I did must have been really lucky. All 3 of those numbers must have been lucky because they were in the high 300s there. So I think B tier is absolutely fair for the Tenet Flux Rifle. When it comes to single target damage, it's decent against like Thraxes and Eximuses, just because Hunter munitions will get a lot of stacks of slashes. Each individual slash proc is pretty pitiful, and that's why it's really bad versus Acolytes that can only stack to 4. But versus like just regular heavy enemies, it's pretty decent. I would say B tier for single target potential. And when it comes to ease of use, this is a weapon you're gonna wanna aim, you're gonna wanna stack deadhead, you're gonna wanna stack scope, so it's not the easiest weapon to use. It's also not too hard though either. So again, right in the middle for B tier for ease of use. So B's across the board. I think the Tenet Flux Rifle is a pretty mid assault rifle. There's a lot of other assault rifles in the game that just have like little quirks that I think pull them a bit over the Tenet Flux Rifle. The only thing the Tenet Flux Rifle has going for it is that it gets a free element with its progenitor, which is cool, but I don't think it beats some of the stronger assault rifles in the game. So that's my take. Tell me what you guys think. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.